to this one of the last book talks of this year's book fair. And we have Mark O'Neill with us again. And as I said last year, Mark must be the most industrious writer in Hong Kong. Every year he turned up with something new, and I haven't heard from him since I talked to him on the very same day last year when he was concluding his then latest book on the Jews, right? The Jews in China. Since then, I have not heard from him. I know he must be disappearing at some corner on Lantau or Sai Kung, right? Smoking with a rolled cigarette, and lost in his Somerset mom-like reflection, right? Bathing himself in the last dusk of the sunset on the west, and planning to produce or hatch up his latest work, while I have been languishing my days and nights away, talking loads of rubbish. So you make me feel very, very guilty first when I see you each time, and make you feel, apart from that, how fast time has gone by. Now, this magician has returned with a new trick, which is of a slightly different nature from the last game he performed in front of us. Last year, you were talking about Jews in China, and you draw us back to Hong Kong and try to help us to explore a little bit more inward how South Asians help to make Hong Kong, right? I mean, we all know in Hong Kong, there are different layers of colors. When we talk about Guai Lo, most of the Chinese people used to think all Guai Los are the same, right? It's taken me ages to explain to some of my friends who have heard about Mark Neal that he is a slightly different Guai Lo. But he's white. Yes, I know he's white. White, right? He's a Guai Lo. He got blue eyes, right? Yes, I know, but he's from Ireland. Where's the island? It's an island off the big island of what you call England and Scotland. Why is it different? And then for me, that would be my moment of feeling very dejected, because I didn't feel like going to the beginning of Henry VIII or 1916. Well, talking about 1916, no wonder you're able to sit here with such a composure, because you have seen all things, like that, okay? Wow, thank you very much. Your very presence here makes me, at least, if not you, feel at ease, right? And there are many kinds of expats. Well, many different expats. Some are from Ireland, some from Scotland, from America, and from England, Canada, or Australia. In recent months, they all unite against one common cause, right? The risk of being sent back to a neighboring country out of something fishy they may have allegedly done across the border. But anyway, that's over. This year, Mark has just introduced his new book that would enlighten us to rediscover what Hong Kong is like. When I was very small, I had a schoolmate in my kindergarten in Wan Chai. I went to a kindergarten in Wan Chai, which is no more. I had a classmate. I had a classmate who appeared physically a little bit differently. I saw him. I saw him with a hairstyle, with his knotted hair, what you call in Cantonese, 一個計. covered with a piece of, covered with a piece of blue silk, right? And he was a boy, right? And everyone told me, wow, that is, I shouldn't say, Tsao, right? I mean, we Cantonese call such names not out of discrimination, but out of intimacy and being friendly, right? And I hope to make that point, right? When we say, oh, saying an lo, the four-eyed, it is not meant to be discriminatory. It's meant to be, making him stand out among the crowd so that we know who he is, right? So that Tsao has got something strange on top of the head. And that was my first impression of South Asians in Hong Kong. And later, not until later did I realize that there are different kinds of, different cultures, different cultural nuances or layers of colors of South Asians. Some are from Punjab, some are from Pakistan, some are from India. Even you talk about India, there are different regions of India. And then not until I grew older, I went to London, was I able to taste different types of South Asian food, ranging from tandoori, Bangladeshi, and Nepalese. Now, I would say, after all these years, I come back with a slightly increased vocabulary of catering taste. But that's all. My limit on the cultures and societies and history of that continent in South Asia is still very great. But well, thanks to Mark, he's done thorough research on a very big topic, although concentrated on a small place like Hong Kong, right? How South Asians helped to make Hong Kong out of their history, culture, profile, food, and shopping. I know you have to add food and shopping onto the cover in order to boost up your circulation. Otherwise, your publisher would not be happy in a year's time, right? I know. You've been very smart. Now, okay. I hand the microphone to you and let you start your enlightening and entertaining lecture as always. Thank you. Why were you interested?
Well, thank you very much to everybody for coming. It's late in the day, and we were very afraid there would be some big demonstrations outside the book fair. So anyway, thank you for braving the weather and these possible demonstrations. I want to thank Professor Tsao for coming today, like he has done in the previous years. 我们每年都是沾老师的光。Every year we sit in the sunlight of Professor Tsao. Now this book was a collective...
You've been living in Hong Kong long enough to pick up this habit of mutual sycophancy, right? But thank you very much. I still appreciate it. Thank you, right? I'm flattered.
No, but this book is a joint effort. There is 4 authors. I'm one. Anne-Marie Evans is another. Unfortunately, she can't be with us tonight. Another is our wonderful photographer, Kevin Lee, who's sitting here very modestly in the front row. Kevin, would you like to get up, please? And everyone who's bought the book comments to me that the pictures are the best part of it. The words rather long, but the pictures are really excellent. And the other person I want to mention is Mr. Raji Ali. Please, get up. Now, without Mr. Ali, we have no book, because I'm a stupid Gwailo. I don't know well the people in the South Asian community. How can I arrange an interview? How can I go somewhere for a visit? And Mr. Ali arranged everything, because he knows everybody, and he arranged it in a very quick time. You want to see the Imam of the Nathan Road Mosque? Mr. Ali will arrange for you to go tomorrow. So I want to thank my three partners for the excellent book. And of course, I must mention the HKTDC for their wonderful arrangements, which they do for us every year, both the organization of the event and for the promotion. And thanks to their promotion, we've had 3 media events in the last 4 days. So it's only because of them. Now, why do we write this book? Well, when they did the census in 2016, the government discovered that 8% of the population of Hong Kong is not Chinese. The largest single group are those from Southeast Asia, about 380,000. And the second largest minority are the South Asians, about 80,000. So they're the people that we're writing about in this book. And why are we writing about them? Because Hong Kong was not created by Chinese and British only. Hong Kong was created by the people from South Asia. On the day that the British officer raised the flag over Hong Kong, January 26, 1841, there were 2,700 Indian soldiers present, and there were also several Parsi merchants. And these are merchants who had already been active here in Guangzhou and Macau, and then they moved to Hong Kong. So right from the beginning, the South Asians have been here, and some families have been here the whole time. So when you meet an Indian here, you may discover he's been here far longer than most Chinese residents of Hong Kong. So can you tell me where's this place? And how many of you have entered it? Yes. Well, this is one reason why we wanted to do the book, because every day thousands of people walk past this magnificent building, but they never enter and they have no idea what's going on inside. So we wanted to show people what was going on inside. And the imam of this mosque, just like everyone else we interviewed, could not have been more helpful and welcoming and showed us everything. So this book, in fact, was very easy to write. And what's this building? That's right. And how many people have been inside? A little bit more. Now, at the moment, the Gurdwara is being redeveloped. So I think in a year or two, it'll be much larger than the one that we're looking at now. How about this? Where is this one? Yes. And how many have been inside this building? Yes. Now, this is a really wonderful building. This overlooks the Happy Valley Racecourse, and this is the main Hindu temple of Hong Kong. So, as I say, the Indians have been here since the beginning, and they have done many different functions in international business, merchants of diamonds and jewelry, soldiers, police, tailors. I think everyone knows about the tailors. And the number of Indians today is double the number that was 1997. So the recent Indians are very much professional people. So they're in medicine, law, finance, and engineering. So let's have a look at the Indians of the earlier era. Now, what are these Indians doing? Well, these are policemen. So in the beginning, when the British came, the officers in the police force were sent from Britain. But they didn't have enough money to send the ordinary constables. So they were constituted by Indians and by Chinese. And why were Sikhs such good policemen? Why do you think the British chose them? Yes, they were brave, they were tall, they're not allowed to cut their hair, so they had beards and they wore turbans. So, of course, they were about twice the size of most Chinese residents of Hong Kong at that time. So I think it was a very good choice, very imposing. I mean, they're very imposing now to look at them, but they were even more imposing at that time. And, of course, they were dislocated from their homeland. They were brought here by the British so that they were loyal to the British. Now, obviously, a Chinese policeman will be much more knowledgeable about the locality and, of course, with the language and the customs. But then he's also more vulnerable to Guanxi, to his clan, to maybe blackmail. So what the British wanted was to have a mixture in the police force of Indians and Chinese. So I think this photo summarizes what I'm trying to say. You want the smart, wily Chinese who knows everything about Hong Kong, and you want the authority and the force of the Sikh. So there they are in their barracks. Now, of course, they didn't have very good living conditions. In their first stint here, they weren't allowed to marry. So all the men lived together, and they would share they would take turns to sleep. They would have a very small area for living. It was a tough life for them. Now, the most prosperous and the most influential Indians in the first phase were Parsis. Now, they came originally from Persia, and they are members of the Zoroastrian religion. And when Islam became the dominant religion of Iran, Persia, most of them emigrated to the west of India. And the word Parsi means Persians. And they were a very wealthy and important merchant community. So as I say, they were already in this part of the world before the British came. They were doing trading with Guangzhou and Macau, and then they moved here. And this is one of the most famous ones, Mr. Modi. Everyone's been to Modi Road in Tsim Sha Tsui. So this is the cemetery. Look, 1852. So the colony was only established 11 years before, and they already have a cemetery there. Now, here is a bust of Mr. Modi. Now, can anyone tell me where this bust is? And why is it there? Yes. So without Mr. Modi, there would be no Hong Kong University. And Mr. Modi himself had not received a very good formal education, but he very much wanted that the young people of Hong Kong, be they Chinese or non-Chinese, could have the opportunity for a university education. So he pushed the idea. He offered a very large sum of money for it. Now, many of the British officials didn't want a university here. Why do you think that was? That is not a very noble reason. Yes, I mean, you don't want people to be too smart and too educated, and of course, if you were a wealthy Chinese in those days, you could send your children abroad for study, but that cost a fortune at those times. So some of the British officials were against the idea, but Mr. Modi persisted, and as a result, we have Hong Kong University. Now, this is Mr. Ratanji. He was also a Parsi merchant, and he is also very famous in Hong Kong for... Yes. His daughter died in 1943 of tuberculosis, and so he donated a very large sum for the building of this Ratanji Sanatorium in Wan Chai. And in 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, tuberculosis was the largest killer in Hong Kong. In the peak year, 1951, 4,120 people died of tuberculosis. So it was the most important health issue in Hong Kong at the time. So thanks to Mr. Ratanji, there was a dedicated hospital which took on the job of fighting tuberculosis. And thanks to the people who worked in this hospital, most of them, I'm happy to say, Irish Columban sisters, they defeated it. And the number of deaths from TB now is very limited. So let's speak a little bit about the Muslims. Now, of course, most of the Muslims here are from Indonesia. They're domestic maids. There are 40,000 ethnic Chinese and 30,000 from Pakistan. Now, since Pakistan was only created after partition, 1947, of course, there were many Indian Muslims here right from the beginning, just as other Indians from 1841. So they, like their Indian brothers, they were soldiers, sailors, gem and jewelry traders, and in many other professions. Now, this is one of the best photographs in the book. So let's ask Kevin just to describe what it is and how he came to take it. Kevin, please.
This is the day of the ending of the Ramadan. They call that I don't know how to pronounce it, the fitr. That is not a weekend. So, and from my observations, they were mostly Indonesian domestic workers. So they were there something like 8:30 a.m. at Victoria Park. So they took their day off, maybe, to come here. And after this, maybe half an hour, 1 hour work, prayer, they go back home to work. I asked one of them, is it true that you do not drink any water and eat throughout the whole day until the evening, like 7 o'clock? She said, yes. So I think it's quite something that you take care of the kids and then work in the whole day and without drinking waters in the summer. So that's something. So that is our feature.
I mean, I think this picture is also a symbol of the tolerance of Hong Kong. I'm sure you know there are in some countries in Europe now where there are many Muslims and they want to build a mosque, but the government won't allow it. So what they do is they have to pray in the street. I mean, such is the ill feeling now in some communities. So I'm very impressed that in Hong Kong they're able to use one of the biggest public spaces, and as you can see, there's a very large number, and nobody objects to it. Now, this is the earliest mosque in Hong Kong. It was built in the 1850s, which tells us how early the Muslims were here, and the British government was very quick to give them permission to build this mosque, and it's still in working use today. Now, this is Mohammed Ashraf, who is the chief imam of Hong Kong. He's the most senior Islamic cleric in Hong Kong, and he could not have been more helpful to us in introducing the community to us, giving us access to the mosque, and allowing us to take pictures. And as Kevin said, the angle at which you take photographs of a Muslim at prayer is quite a sensitive one. So again, the Imam was very gracious to allow us to shoot him from the front. Of course, it's a much better picture if you shoot from the front. But I think a lot of Muslims would not allow it because it's too personal. Now, this is an Indian Muslim who was in the British Army during the war. And I think you know, the Japanese set up something called the Indian National Army, which was an army nominally to liberate India from British rule. So it fought on the Japanese side. So this man was captured during the Battle of Hong Kong, and the Japanese wanted him to join their Indian National Army, but he refused, and he was executed. So he is as far as the British Army is concerned, he is a hero. And you'll find in the book a very moving picture of his tombstone in Hong Kong. Now, let's talk a little about the Sikhs. They're a very important part of the story. They come from Punjab, and they've also been in Hong Kong since the 1850s. They've worked also in many different sectors. Now, the picture on the top left is a photo that was taken during World War II, because after the Japanese attacked Hong Kong, the temple continued to operate, and the Sikhs are extremely welcoming. Even today, they have a kitchen on the basement, and anyone can go there and be given a free meal, vegetarian meal, but a free meal. Doesn't matter who you are. And they told us that when the British consulate here has, how could I put it, an undesirable British, i.e. someone with no money that they don't really want to deal with, they ring up the Sikh temple and say, can we send him to you? And they say yes. So he comes and he stays in the temple for 3 or 4 days, and he's fed, in the basement of the temple. So they were doing this after the Japanese attack. So the Japanese planes going overhead saw that this was going on, saw there were many people inside the temple, and there was a British flag flying over it, which was perhaps a mistake. So they bombed the temple. So this was the photo taken after the bombing, and the chief priest at the time was killed in the bombing. Now the pictures below are the prayer ceremonies of the Sikhs, and again, we want to thank them very much for their cooperation, and they allowed us to shoot whatever we wanted from whatever angle. And of course, from a photographer's point of view, it's much better that you can go to the front, the back, to the side. You can shoot as you wish. Now, this is the kitchen I mentioned in the basement, where people are given free meals. Now, let's talk a little about the Gurkhas. They're from Nepal. And they were a very important part of Hong Kong before 1997, especially during the Cultural Revolution in the 1970s, early 80s, when thousands of people from China wanted to enter Hong Kong. So their job was to patrol the border and prevent the illegals coming in. And this was a 24-hour-a-day job. And the Gurkha soldiers had rifles, but the rifles had no bullets in them. So the illegals would think they were armed, but actually they weren't armed. So I interviewed one of them, and he said there were days when the PLA soldiers were on the other side with a rifle trained at them, and they could have shot at any moment. But luckily, in this case, they didn't shoot. So he told me that 1 month they arrested 16,000 people. Can you just picture that? In 1 month, 16,000 people. But he said to me their orders were not to harm the illegals. Their only job was to stop them, detain them, and then prepare them to hand them back. So this was a very critical job they did for Hong Kong. So there they are, patrolling the border. Now, this is the gentleman I interviewed, and I would like to ask Kevin to tell us a story about this photograph.
This is Captain Nam. I have no contact in Hong Kong on Nepalese people, so I search on the internet to try to contact ex-Nepalese soldiers. Thanks to Ali, one day he gave me a picture of this temple. This temple is a British-built temple for Hinduism, a level 3 heritage site now because of the shape. And at that time, from what I know, is they had 8 temples for Nepalese soldiers. Only one is like this shape. And I was thinking, what if I can put ex-Nepalese soldiers here to take pictures? That would be great. So I searched on the internet and found the Facebook called Gurkhas in Hong Kong, a third-generation Gurkha, Nepalese young man who promised to help me to find a captain, ex-soldiers. And then, so he found Captain Nam. But at first, he said, no, I don't want to be in the pictures anymore, because South China Morning Post came and take pictures of my kukri knife and never get back to me. I called them again and said they don't return my call. I don't want people to take pictures of my kukri knife anymore. I said, no, we are. So with the help of that Nepalese young man, he finally promised to show his knife, which is not easy to find in Hong Kong. Although there are many ex-Nepalese soldiers in Hong Kong, it's not that easy to find cookery knife anymore. So we succeed in bringing him to that temple and take a portrait to show something like, in those days, they were worshipping there. And then they have all the ceremony, New Year's in that temple. And this is very difficult. If you know the place called流水響 in Phunling, and go to 流水響公廁, the public toilet of 流水響, there's a road at the back of the 公廁, and you climb up the hill, and then there's a fence, there's a construction site. You climb up there without road, okay? 10 minutes, you will find this temple. So the road is called 布格仔路, if you drive. Okay, if you take a minibus, it's called 流水向公廁, 司機流水向公廁流落. Okay, so this is interesting site here.
So if you want to know about the life of Captain Nam, please read our book, and we have an interview with him, and his life is quite extraordinary, yes. So let's speak a little about the Sri Lankans. There are not so many of them in Hong Kong. They are later arrivals, but they have a very wonderful cultural center, and we went there and we interviewed the monk who runs it. There he is, and he gave us a lot of wisdom about Buddhism. This is one of the events arranged by the Sri Lankan Cultural Center, one of their holy days. We are very honored today to have the Bangladesh Consul General with us, Mr. Hassan. Thank you very much for coming. They're also quite a small community in Hong Kong. It's now growing, and Bangladesh is a major global textile producer. It's the second largest exporter in the world after China. And we interviewed the chairman of the Bangladesh Chamber of Commerce, and he explained to me that Bangladesh is becoming the second Dongguan. And since he told me that, I realized how true, how correct he is, because I'm sure you know the US-China trade war is getting worse. Tariffs are being imposed by the US side. So many companies, Chinese companies, foreign companies, need production outside of China if they're going to go to the US market. So for many of these companies, Bangladesh is the choice of their investment. Now, these are photographs which Kevin took at the Bangladesh Association, and there they teach Bengali to the children. It's not on the curriculum of Hong Kong schools. So if you're a Bangladeshi and you want your child to learn to read and write Bengali, then you send your child to this center. Now, this man is probably the most eminent South Asian in Hong Kong. He was a judge of the Hong Kong Court of Final Appeal. And he has also an extraordinary story. I mean, his family background, how he came to be here. So if you want to learn about that, please read the book. Now, just as Chip mentioned earlier, the publisher insisted that we make the book more attractive by including sections on cuisine and shopping. If it's just culture, history, religion, this is rather dull. So this is what we've added in the second half of the book. And this is another of their great contributions to Hong Kong, because thanks to the South Asians, people in Hong Kong can eat this extraordinary diversity of menus. If you're a devout Muslim, you can eat halal food, or if you're a very strict Buddhist, you can eat a vegetarian or vegan meal. There are all kinds of cuisines available. So here's some of the delicacies. Many Indians went into tailoring, and I'm sure you all know Sam Taylor. He's the most famous one. We went to interview him, and he and his family have been making these handmade suits for many decades, and his customers include many famous people around the world. Here is jewelry from Nepal. The story I remember best was, it was a British cabinet minister came here. And at that time, the British government was having a campaign called Made in Britain, because Britain was being invaded by lots of excellent foreign goods, and the British products could not compete with them. So all the British were being encouraged to buy British products. But this British trade minister was staying in his hotel, and then he went out of his hotel and he walked to Sam Taylor's, and Mr. Sam said, "Can I make a suit for you?" And he said yes. So he made the suit as usual within 24 hours with exactly the fabric that he wanted, exactly the design he wanted. So he was extremely happy with his suit. But unfortunately, this emerged in the newspapers. So the day he flew back to Britain, the photograph was of him getting off the plane in his wonderful new suit, but unfortunately it was made in Hong Kong, not made in Britain. Yeah. So there he is, fitting a customer. But I mean, there are many others. He's just the most famous one. Sports is another great contribution from South Asians to Hong Kong. The Sikhs brought hockey. Hockey is the only event at which India wins a gold medal in the Olympics, and this is because of the Sikhs. So the Sikhs in Hong Kong are extremely good at hockey. And many of the South Asians are excellent at cricket. So most of the Hong Kong cricket team consists of people from the South Asian countries. So they're the Sikhs playing hockey. Now I live in Mei Fu. In Mei Fu we have a large South Asian community. So the place where I play football, we share the park with Pakistanis practicing cricket. So I see this scene regularly. And this is Nepalese children practicing taekwondo. I haven't spoken much about the religious life of the South Asians. This is also very diverse, very rich. And we have many religious festivals here. We mentioned already Ramadan. Diwali is another very important festival in Hong Kong. So these are photographs that we took related to that. These are Nepalese dancers. Yeah.
Buddha's birthday in Ma Lau Shan Gongyuan.
Okay, I could talk a lot more, but I think that's enough. If you have a question for me, for Kevin, for Mr. Ali, we welcome them all. Please. Don't be shy.
Can you give us some background about the actual writing of the book? I thought that was what you were kind of going for.
Well, actually, as I mentioned in the beginning, it was actually quite easy. When the publisher gave us the assignment, I was quite afraid because I was not very knowledgeable on this topic, and my friendships with people in the South Asian community were quite limited. But luckily, the publisher introduced me to Mr. Ali here, and Mr. Ali knows everyone in the South Asian community. So I was able to draw up a list of the people I wanted to interview. Mr. Ali arranged it in very short time, and I found everyone could not have been more helpful. They gave us the time we wanted. We wanted to take a lot of pictures, and that is also sometimes difficult to arrange, but not at all. No, this was also extremely easy. So, no, I have to say the book was very easy to write. And I mean, there are many reasons for this, but I think one is that they are very happy to be living here. They feel it's a great blessing to live in Hong Kong. It's a very peaceful city. It's got religious harmony. In many countries in the world now, there is conflict between the different religions. And especially if you're a minority, life is difficult. So I think they all feel a sense of gratitude that they are living here. And of course, many people would rather live in Hong Kong than go back to their country of origin. I mean, that option is available, but they prefer to stay here. So I think they've got a very positive view of Hong Kong.
We knew we had a bit of an issue with China during 1997 about their nationality status. Now, that has been more or less settled. But I heard from time to time that these Hong Kongers whose origins have been outside Hong Kong, some find it easy to apply for exchange home return permit in order to cross the border to go to travel in China. And some have got their home return permit declined by the China Travel Agency. Have you heard about that?
Well,
and
this is a very important
complained?
question because, of course, before 97, all the non-Chinese citizens of Hong Kong were very concerned as to what would happen. So the chairman of the Indian Chamber of Commerce told me that they went to Beijing to ask about this, and they were told that since you're not Chinese, you will not qualify as Hong Kong citizens. So they then went to Mr. Patton, the prostitute of 1,000 generations, as the Chinese called him that time. And Mr. Patton took the cause up with the British government.
They itch to call him again in recent days. They're itching to call him again on recent days.
And Mr. Patton persuaded the UK government to grant full UK passports to this community. And the chairman explained that India does not allow dual nationality. So if you were a holder of an Indian passport, if you wanted to apply for the full British one, you had to
renounce.
You had to give up your Indian passport. So that's what most of them did. And then they got the full British one. However, 1997 came, life did not change very much. I mean, many people left, but the ones that stayed found that life didn't change. You still had your business, you still had your factory. So many of those who left came back again and continued the life that they had before. So it didn't then become the issue they feared it would be. However, where the issue is more important is that before 97, of course, English was, with Chinese, one of the two official languages, but if you were a South Asian, you were working in the government, you were in a very good position. But after 97, written and reading of Chinese became mandatory. And this was not good for many South Asians because whilst they were fluent in the spoken language, their education had not included a very intensive study of the written language. So it became much more difficult to get jobs in the government after 1997. So I think that's the biggest impact on them of the handover. Yeah.
So thank you. Mr. O'Neill, so may I share with you some of my sentiments regarding your speaking? And I think it served very well to remind me of my early stage in Hong Kong, especially in mid-90s when I was a primary school student. And at that time, there was a Indian, my classmate, and I also had a friend making acquainted with him in a basketball court outside after school. So I think it's very good because at that moment, what I want to emphasize is we are just a very little kids and have no idea or no sense, to be precise, about the class or the race, but things has changed as I grew up. When I have been put into the social hierarchy, so to speak. So it's like I have been made to see things, wittingly or not, unconsciously or not, different. And this is first. And the second one, even today nowadays I live in a public housing in Hong Kong. There are some black people in Pakistan or Indian. I try to, honestly, I hardly had seen them speak or communicate or exchanging views with the residents in the whole building in which I lived. But I may be the only guide who would offer to speak to them because they are minor. I mean, a minority. So I want to try to let them understand there is someone who can not just speak to you, but also would like to confer you a feeling that I care about you. So in this regard, I would like to raise the question is that when you say the Hong Kong, in a very general term, you say people in this race would like to, there is a great deal of tolerance in Hong Kong. But what I have seen is that there's a very, the multi-ethnic, being multi-ethnic somehow does not necessarily make a multicultural society when it's socially isolated in terms of daily life when it comes to communicating. So I think it should take a further inspection is needed when you to understand people sitting next to each other without speaking to each other, and sometimes people doesn't mean what they speak, and that's what comes across to my mind.
Well, I think your neighbors would love it if you would speak to them, because you are right. They are a minority. They are living, in the midst of this big Chinese community. They probably feel a little bit outside of it. So yes, I think they would be very moved if you would go forward and invite them for a tea, invite them for a lunch, and make friends with them. I think they would like it very much. Yeah. But this is not restricted to Hong Kong. What you've described is a situation which is very common, I'm afraid to say, many places in Europe. And we are not in a good position to lecture anybody about what they should do.
Apologies, I was a bit late earlier, so if I missed this, but I want to ask a quick question. What is the main objective for you? Like you said, a publisher reached out to you write this book, but what is the objective behind it? Is this book bilingual? Is it only in English, or? Oh yes, I did see it.
No, the purpose of this book is exactly to answer the question which the gentleman has just raised, which is the publisher, who is a Hong Kong lady, said, we've lived in Hong Kong all these years. We walk past the mosque, we walk past the temple, we walk past the Diwali festival. How do we see? We look, but we don't see. We don't know what's going on there. We have no contact with that person. So she said, I want you to write this book so that Chinese people or Guailos can understand what these other communities are doing, why they're here, what's their contribution to Hong Kong. So she wants to build a bridge between the South Asians and the Hong Kong people. And I mean, let's not be too pleased with ourselves. But of course, if our brothers and sisters from the mainland come, we hope they'll buy the book too and learn something about it. But this was her idea. And in fact, her idea is to have a series about Southeast Asians, Koreans, Japanese, I mean, even the evil Gwailos, maybe even a book about them, their contribution to Hong Kong. But we've just not got to this point yet. But this is her idea. She wants to build a bridge between the Hong Kong Chinese and all the other communities here.
To finish off then, I see when you came and you talked about different people who made a difference. Have you looked into the history of it from during the British times or pre-British times? Or share a bit of when the British were here, with how the Sikhs came in the police and how the Gurkhas came after. Have you covered any of that in your book?
Yes. Yeah.
I think the main purpose of this book is to indicate to most Hong Kong people what the term identity, Hong Kong identity means. A lot of people here, among youngsters, talk about we Hong Kongers, this and that. I mean, when they say that, do they mean to include other ethnic minorities, Hong Kongers, whose great-grandfathers may have been born in Hong Kong before theirs arrived, right? I think that's quite important. Nowadays, we all talk about, Carrie Lam talks about we connect, right? I think it's a very relevant term now. Everyone is getting connected. The expats communities are getting connected with local Hong Kong Cantonese youngsters who get connected with mainlanders and get connected with South Asian Hong Kongers. I think we are very much a rainbow city. There's much fun in it. Right? When we talk about Hong Kong tourism, we try to market Hong Kong tourism. I think the government or the tourism board should bear more of the contents of this book on their mind to tell the world a three-dimensional and a complex Hong Kong story. It's a rainbow story. Right? And as Mark said, I mean, you take a trip to the Hong Kong Catholic cemetery, and each of the tombstones there is almost a unique story of different peoples coming from different countries, well, mainly from Britain, perhaps, but some from Ireland, some from India and Pakistan or whatever, to set on a journey of rediscovering the multi-layered rainbow community of Hong Kong, and that's of great importance. Right? I mean, Hong Kong itself has been a product of globalization anyway, created by East India Company and the British, the trade of opium or whatever, and even these South Asian people coming to Hong Kong, they came in at different times, which could be mirrored on the history of the British colonial conquest of the Indian subcontinent, when they had a war with the Gurkhas, with Nepal, and when they had a war in Punjab, where they encountered the Sikhs, right? And then how they recruited, beat the Sikhs perhaps, but very impressed, and then started recruiting the Sikhs for their next battle to another tribe, right?
Worse than that. I mean, in the first war and the second war, there were tens of thousands of Indian soldiers dying, in the Somme or Burma.
Burma, yes.
For the British Empire. I mean,
yes.
I can't really grasp this.
Yes.
How would you explain to the mother of the dead soldier, for what did your son die? But the British succeeded in doing this.
Yes.
And without the Indian soldiers, the British Empire would not have endured.
Yes, the previous or earlier chapters of British colonialism are very much reflected on the population in Hong Kong. I mean, these are end results of earlier British colonial conquests. Why do they end up here? And why are they among themselves different in origins? And these contain, these just make up a mini encyclopedia of British colonial history in Hong Kong alone, which is worth exploring and discovering. Right?
Good evening. That was a wonderful presentation. I just want to make a comment on some of your words. When you said that there should be much more awareness of the ethnic minorities here, and as he also mentioned right now that Hong Kong is a melting pot. It's a very diverse place, and everybody is welcome. I would like to state that I am from the Parsi Zoroastrian community. And of course, we're very proud of what we have achieved. And we are a minority of the minorities. We're just about 250 people here in Hong Kong. So what you said is very right, that more people should be aware, and there should be much more awareness of the growth of Hong Kong and how much of who has contributed. And that I'm sure is very well explained in your book. I just wanted to comment on that. Thank you very much, sir.
Well, so I think we're especially grateful to the Parsi community because the numbers are very small.
Very minuscule, yes.
But the contribution is enormous.
Huge, yes.
It's, by per capita, yours is the greatest contribution, yes. I think.
There are, many people were not aware of the fact that this Sir Hormuzzi Modi statue, which is in the Hong Kong University, the 12th of October is his birthday. And I represent the Parsi community and go and garland the statue. And in the earlier years that I had been going there, I used to ask people passing by as to, who this gentleman is. So unfortunately, not many people knew. And things like the Star Ferry also, which was started by Zoroastrian. So as you rightly said, the awareness should be much more, and I'm sure your book helps a lot.
We hope so. We hope so.
Thank you.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for your sharing just now. And I have a quick question. You mentioned that you added the food section into the book according to the publisher's requirement. And my question, because I'm a foodie, so have you ever tried all the food introduced, and which is your favorite one?
That's a trick question. How can I answer that without offending those? No, I tried some. Kevin tried some. Anne-Marie Evans, my fellow author, she tried some. I think all I can say is we were delighted by the diversity, and we're so lucky. Hong Kong's a small place, that in this very small place you can try so many different foods. But I hesitate to choose one for fear of being impolite. Sorry. Kevin, what's your favorite?
An Indian snacks called mani puri. Some sauce in pani puri, yeah. Some sauce in the water in the spices, and then try that. When you put it in your mouth, it bursts into your mouth. It's extraordinary. You can go to Shanghai Street, one of them, Napoli restaurant, which has lots of prostitutes standing outside. That one, you can try that. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you for telling us so much story about the South Asian. But one question from me is that South Asian is a generalized term. So when it comes to identifying different kinds of South Asian, I just would like to ask one question. Very often, for example, for me, it is quite a little bit easy to get confused in between the Pakistani and the Indian because they, to me, more or less look the similar or same. But for ladies, I can recognize because they have religious wearing, then I can identify their identity. But for men, it's slightly tricky for me. So how have they expressed anything like this when it comes to your interview with them? Have they complained about how Hong Kong people misidentify their identities, things like this?
Well, I mean, we Guaylos, we're all the same, yes? I mean, what is the difference between French and a German and a British and Irish? They're all the same. So when I discuss this question, my Indian and Pakistani, Bangladesh friends, they have a lot to say about the sins of the British Empire. Because you know, of course, all of this area we're speaking about was all one country before. It was all the British Empire. And then it was partitioned into two countries, India and then West and East Pakistan, and now it's three. East Pakistan become Bangladesh. I better be careful what I say now. We have the Bangladesh Consul. But many Indian people are very polite, but they say, how was this partition done? On what basis was it done? How was the border drawn? To decide who is going to be in which country. And as you know, the fact of partition was an absolutely tragic event because millions of people had to leave their homes, their farms, their businesses, and moved to the other country. And most of them lost everything that they left behind. If they could take gold or jewelry with them, they could keep it. But otherwise, the physical assets they couldn't take with them. And I'm sure you know this partition was done in a short time. It was done because the British government was very short of money. It couldn't support this huge empire anymore after World War II. So it was done for the benefit of the ruling country. It was not done considering the interests of the people involved. So very politely, the Indians and Pakistanis would speak about this. So that's the reason why, as you asked, we have these differences now. And of course, now the differences are quite sharp because of the history of what has, the differences of what is, because of the results of that partition now.
Another follow-up question is that have they ever expressed their feeling towards their home country as they are having two identities? One is Hong Kongness, another is their home country one. So have they expressed anything like homesick or things like this during your interview with them?
This is a very good question. I mean, it is very impressive that even they've been away for so many years, in some cases many generations from their home country, still they are practicing their religion. They have the same community. They are practicing the same festivals. They are continuing to eat the same food. And this is quite rare in the world, you know. When people migrate to another country, usually the first generation will keep the religion, the language, the customs, but the second, the third generation will lose it and just adopt the customs and the language, the religion of the country they've moved to. But the communities we interviewed, they've managed to retain both. So they're living in Hong Kong, they've got a business, they've got a home, many of them speak Cantonese very well, but they also maintain their religion as Parsi or Sikh or as a Hindu. And they have a temple and they follow the festivals. And this is quite admirable. But when you ask them, will your daughter marry another Sikh or another a member of the same community, it becomes difficult because Hong Kong, as Chip said, is an international city. And most of the children of these people will attend a Hong Kong school or an international school, or they'll go abroad for study. So most of their classmates will not be from the same community. So for the parents, this is quite a difficult thing. Of course, they want their children to retain the language, the culture, and the religion of their ancestors. But if their daughter is studying in America or Australia and is surrounded by, people from other communities, it's much more likely she'll fall in love with one of them. So, in a way, it's now more difficult than it was in the past, when people were not so well off, and people would tend to live in a smaller space, whereas now people move more and go abroad to live. Yeah.
I want to say thank you very much for that. I've lived here for 8 years, and I take a lot of interest in history here in Hong Kong, that place I'm lucky enough to live in. But I learned so much there over 1 hour before I read the book, so thank you for that. But it makes me think that there are lots of people who've lived here for 8 years and have an active interest in history but don't know enough. Is there more, you think, that the government, we're not going to talk too much about the government here, obviously, these days, but do you think there's more that the government can do to try and open people's eyes to the actual history here? People like Mr. Modi, etc., that maybe many, many people don't know about. Do you think the government could do more? Would you like to see the government do more?
Yeah, I think this is a very good question. I think the answer to this is, as you know, the Hong Kong school curriculum is very crowded. People have to study lots of subjects. You have to study Chinese, you have to study Cantonese, you have to study Mandarin, you have to study English, you then have to study a lot of other subjects. There's exams to do all the time. The pressure on the students is very, very severe. So I think the government answer would probably be, in principle, we agree with you that, of course, these are very important elements of Hong Kong history. But, our curriculum now is so loaded. It's very hard for us to put in additional...
They wouldn't bother.
Additional... That's what do you think?
Because I'm going to generalize a little bit, because most British colonial rulers in this country, they came here with a passion for knowledges, right? Before setting their feet on the journey, they were keen adventurers, explorers, right? Potential geologists, anthropologists. So, that was a part of the British or the Anglo-French colonial mindset. If you had not felt passionate about leaving the miserable country of England, right, with bad weather, bad food, bad weather, a very boring. No, there was no television, of course, right? And you wouldn't have taken the chance, taken the risk of selling out, as you did. You were driven by curiosity about everything. That was the basic motivation of colonialism, which has more or less been demonized by liberals or by radical ideologists who didn't like particularly that chapter of human history. So, as the colonials gave up their colonies, and these colonies were taken up by some natives, right? It would be quite lucky if the first generation of native rulers like Lee Kuan Yew, like Tunku Rahman, right? In those days, in the late 1950s, they had been sent to Oxford or Cambridge to study, and before then they had gone to English schools in Malaya or in Singapore, and their mind in those days had more or less been molded similarly, with a certain degree of knowledge of anthropology, right? And unfortunately, that kind of mindset has been lost. And even now, we talk about Muslims in some countries, why are mosques being disallowed or not being restricted to be built in some countries? Because in some countries, the culture of Islam has been fundamentalized. When we talk about these earliest mosques built in Hong Kong, we were dealing with the original features, the earlier features of Islam. There was the pre-fundamentalized Islam before 1979, before Khomeini of Iran or that sort of things, right? So I mean, things have very much changed, and the Hong Kong native government now, they have been, well, including the chief executive, whose name I would rather not mention. They went to colonial schools in Hong Kong. They went to University of Hong Kong. They got the degree in late 1970s or early 80s. Their upbringing has been very different. They did not go through that bit of selling, right? That bit of that long process or stage of going through, a long journey like Robinson Crusoe or whatever. So that mindset with curiosity combined with courage, a bit of a heroism, and of course, right, inevitably, racism no longer exists. So they're not interested. They wouldn't open their eyes and look around. They don't even understand the very pulse of the young generation of their own race, and let alone other South Asian ethnic minorities who have been living here for generations. They wouldn't reach out and talk to them. That's the problem. And plus the ideological indoctrination from Beijing in the past 22 years, which has been emphasizing Hong Kong as part of China. We Hong Kongers are Chinese. We Hong Kongers are Chinese. Now they have problem dealing with young Chinese Hong Kongers who refuse to think that they are Chinese, right? They are now struggling to heal that kind of disease, right? And how would they have time to deal with other ethnic minorities who have been living here in Hong Kong for generations, who should be treated as or seen as being melted into Hong Kong, right? I mean, such inadequacies, unfortunately, are becoming more and more common. And I don't know how you should do about it. The Hong Kong government has got a lot of foreign reserve. They are much richer than the British colonial government in Hong Kong in the 1950s after the Second World War. But simply there's the kind of inertia or reluctance, right, or indifference on the part of Hong Kong SAR government. Right? I hope one day they're going to learn. Right?
Well, unfortunately, the time is up today. All our books are available outside. If you buy some, I'd be very happy to sign them, and my wife will be very happy with me. So thank you very much for coming.